Okay, I wanted to go along with this Melee #3 saga of my Haas Mini Mill acquisition. And if you haven't seen the first two videos, this thing is just my story about why I decided to get a mini mill and what the rigmarole I went through to get it here and stuff like that. So if you're not a total novice, if you have purchased Haas machinery before and know what you're buying and all that other stuff, and are familiar with CNC, this video is not for you. And if you're not interested in learning about my experience, please turn the video off, go do something more interesting. I'm just going to be rambling on with moments of demented, incoherent psychobabble about my fears and jubilations and all like that. So I also wanted to mention why I got the mini mill. I believe it's the only machine in this category anyway that is 110 volt, 220 volt, single phase. All the other machines are 3-phase. So I did get it in, hooked it up. It seems to be working fine. And as I mentioned before, I paid for the training, but when the machine comes a couple weeks after, they will send a technician who's going to level it and make sure it's hooked up right and things like that. So you have to have the machine hooked up to electric, otherwise they're not going to touch it. And they make it very clear that if they send a technician out to your shop and the machine's not ready to go, he's not going to touch it. He's going to come back later, and they're going to charge you for the travel time. So you know, they've got these really hard-nosed rules sometimes, but I guess, you know, they don't want any you know, unfortunate surprises. So that is what it is. When the technician got here, I was talking to some of the guys I had here, and I said, yeah, I got the smallest machine. And he said, oh, we've got them this small as a refrigerator. And I said, geez, you know, maybe I should have got one of those, but they didn't really advertise those very much, these real small ones as small as a refrigerator. But they're $60,000. I mean, they do all kind of fancy stuff, but I think they don't even take the Cat 30 collets or anything like that. So that wouldn't have been in my ballpark. And a little while after I got my machine, I see that now they have a desktop model. And I'm like, holy crap, I could have got the desktop model. But I don't know, that thing is not cheap. I forget, it's about as much as a mini mill. And it only cuts wax. So what am I going to do? Try to prototype parts out of wax? You know, I got to have a good working prototype to see if it's working. And speaking of prototype, by the way, I said I thought my patent came through. I have a patent. No big deal. Yeah, right. A lot of work. That's what's keeping me busy, but it feels good. And maybe I'll make a video on how you guys can get your own patents. Okay. Now, as I was saying, I was really shook up about this truck getting down my street. I had already researched a dozen places around town where this thing could drop it off. A truck could drop it off, I could pick it up. How am I going to pick it up? And but I got a hold of the guy who does the shipping, and he says, hey, where are we going to bring this to? I said, well, I thought I kind of made that clear to somebody, but this is a guy, I guess, more talkative. So he's on Google Maps, and he's looking at my house. He said, I can't find your house. I can't find your house. And I'm telling him where it is. I couldn't find it. I think he finally did find it. And I said, look, I talked to my neighbor. You see this house right here with this big yard? I think a truck could go in there. Because he's saying he doesn't know how big the truck's going to be. He says it could be 80 feet. I think 80 feet's the maximum. The truck I got, I think was probably around 70 feet. I think it was a 50-foot trailer, and I think the cab was another 20 feet. I was so shook up that day, I wasn't paying attention. And I also want to say, if I didn't mention before, I don't have any video of this thing being unloaded. I had a camera, and I said, well, I'm going to be too busy. I said, I put the camera down. I told a couple people, please take out your phones and video this, because I'm probably going to want to make a YouTube and tell my story. A couple of them said, yeah, we'll video it. Nobody did. Sorry about that. You just have to vividly picture my description. So, anyway, we finally talked to the guy, get on Google Maps and everything, and what I had done is I started to think about how trucks turn a corner at an intersection. And even right down my street there's an intersection where these trucks turn and make a 90-degree turn, come up this road. And I think, man, those trucks turn 90 degrees. And then I started looking at truck stops on Google Maps and seeing how big they were. And then I was watching some YouTube videos on how these trucks back in and turn. And I said, you know what? There's a side street, 1,000 feet from my driveway. The guy could turn around there. If he had to, he could back all the way out to the street he came down. That's about 3/4 of a mile. Hell, just back up and back around there. I got a couple flagmen that I had for this day, and we'll make sure everything's okay. So now I'm starting to feel more and more confident. So the big day finally arrives. I know that this truck could probably go down my side street, no problem. And some guy says, he says, look, when we tell you what time we're going to deliver, we're there with like in a half an hour. Well, yeah, but they don't tell you until like a day ahead of time. So it'd be nice if they told you a week ahead of time. So, but a week ahead of time, they tell you what day. And then like a day ahead of time, they'll give you the hour. Well, there was a hiccup with my delivery truck. The guy was like an hour late. He called me. I said, yeah, no problem. We hung around for an hour. So he comes, and he didn't ask me where I lived or nothing. And I'm like in a confusing thing, because I'm, I'm in a suburb, a little bit of a country situation. So they must have really good GPS. They know exactly where they're going. So like 45 minutes later, I get a call from the guy, and he says, and I'm getting all calm now, hey, it's coming, everything's going to go fine, I got my crew, I got this 8,000-pound forklift, everything's good, I got skates for the thing, everything's good, I got a crew, young guys help me, I got fork extensions to 8 feet if I need it, I got 6-foot forks, everything's good. Guy says, I'm not going to deliver that thing. He says, I'm not going down your street. It's a dead-end street. You talk about instant insanity. I said, man, it's a good thing the guy wasn't standing in front of me. I said, what do you mean? I said, you know, we got this side street. Yeah. Well, I'm parked up at your street, and I'll come look at it. I said, good, good. You're right at my street there? Yeah. I said, oh, no problem, no problem. Look, stay there. I'm going to get in the car. I'm going to come get you. So I tell my son, look, I'm going to get the car, and I'm going to go. Just stay here, and I'm going to tell you point blank, do not move. You stay here. So while I'm getting my car, he gets in his car and he leaves. Naturally. So him and another guy go up. They pick up the truck driver. They bring him down. Halfway down my street, the guy sees the side road. He goes, oh, no problem. He comes back. I call my kid and he says, yeah, everything's taken care of. So I guess I forgive my kid. I don't know. So anyway, okay, so I go back and I had the forklift parked close to the house. I get in the forklift and I start driving it up to my driveway. And the truck's already there and it's backed up. So the guy must have came down my street, went into the side street, backed all the way down to my driveway. That fast. Unbelievable. Real friendly guy, nice guy. So I unload the thing and he pulls up his straps and he's gone. Man, I mean he was going in like 5 minutes. He says, sign this. That you got delivery, whatever. I said, fine. So, very slowly get the machine up to my my patio here, my driveway. And you can see it's bolted to this huge pallet. And the thing is in this big white plastic bag. It's like a tarp. It's kind of fuzzy on the inside. It's plastic on the outside. And there's a big zipper all the way around it. So we unzip it, whatever, and then we try and figure out how to get the bolts out. So we get the bolts out, and I come back with the forklift, and then we get back under it without the pallet. I lift it up, we get the pallet out of the way, and then we put the thing on skates. Now, my son happened to have these skates that were homemade. You could tell they're homemade. They're 2 pieces of angle iron with just a bunch of ball bearings with a bolt through. And there's a video on YouTube. A guy made ones just like it. Now I had these yellow skates called multi-ton, and those things are about 4 inches high, and the one my son had were about 2 inches high, and supposedly this thing's going to fit through my garage door, no problem. But for some reason, it's a lot taller than the specs I got. And I tell you, the difference between 4-inch skates and 2-inch skates, when you're talking, I don't know, a 77-inch machine, doesn't sound like much, but it is important. It helped. So I use these skates, put them under the, there's 4 screws that go down. These screws fit into a round pad. Well, the round pads were off their side, so we just put the machine with the 4 screws right on top of the skates and rolled it in that way. And then when we had the garage door up, we uncoupled the garage door so it would go even higher. It went as high as the frame would allow. And still it wouldn't fit. But the part that wouldn't fit was the cables on top. And they're enclosed in this plastic sort of puzzle tinker toy thing, you know. So we start pushing it back, pushing it back. It's obvious that it's not going to fit, but like it has a metal sort of chimney, then this shroud, this plastic shroud of these segmented pieces comes out of it. So my son gets up there and he starts taking some pieces apart. And I said, "You gonna be able to put that back together?" He says, yeah. So I don't know, it looks real confusing to me. But we take some apart and we get a little bit more take. So we ended up taking like about 80% of it apart, lay the cables down, and we slid it inside the garage. And then he went to work and he put all this back together and it worked fine. So got the machine in, hooked up the electric, and I took as much of the shipping stuff off that I could. But the 4 bolts on the bottom, I couldn't loosen. I could loosen one. One was loose, but the others was real hard to do. And there's a nut like on the bolt. There's a flange, the nut, the bolt, and there's another bolt underneath the flange. Okay, so I'm thinking like a lot of times when somebody wants to tighten something, you take a nut on one side, a nut on the other, and you tighten the two together. So I can't get a wrench on this top nut because I think it was 1 3/8. And I got 3 1 3/8 sockets, 3/4 inch drive sockets, but they're standard length. They're only about that high, and this bolt is about that long on the top. So you need a box end wrench, 1 3/8, or you need a deep socket. And I didn't have either one of those. So I thought, well, maybe I'll unloosen the bolt on the bottom, and then I'll loosen everything. So I get some huge wrenches on Wayland, and man, I've got some wrenches. I could modify a wrench and really crank on this thing. But I just got a big adjustable wrench, probably a 20-inch adjustable wrench, and that crank is not going anywhere. I said, well, before I really wail on this thing, let me look at it underneath. Sure enough, underneath it's welded. So it has to be loosened from the top. So I can't really get this thing set in place because I can't move these bolts. I was going to level it myself a little bit. So I'm thinking, do I have to go out and buy, I mean, this is probably going to be like, I don't know, a $25 item to buy one deep 1 3/8 socket or a box end wrench that'll fit in there, because the flange has 2 sidewalls to it in the bottom, so it's U-shaped, connected to the mill, and there's nuts here. So you can only get a box end wrench here to fit between there. So I called the salesman and I said, look, because they don't give you the number of the guy who's going to come here and level it. You know, you don't get that number. You all you have is the number of the salesman. So I called the salesman. I said, look, is this guy, when he comes out, is he going to come out with a 1 3/8 inch wrench? And he goes, I don't know. He's never been there for this thing. And if he has, he never looked at this stuff. So I said, look, I don't want the guy to come out and he can't level the thing because this thing is there, and he can't get a wrench in there. I said, give me his number. So he gave me his number. I call up the guy, and I said, look, you got a 1 3/8 inch Bach wrench? He goes, of course. I said, okay, that's all I want to know. So the guy comes out, and one was loose. I got one loose. Maybe I got two loose. Now I got one loose, and then he took just like a 3/4 inch wrench on top of the this bolt, and he just loosened it with that. Okay, because it's got a hex on the top of the threaded rod. And I'm like, oh God, I didn't know you could do that. But then he couldn't do it with the other two. So he gets out his 1 3/8 wrench, he loosens up the lock nut, and he's leveling it. But I went ahead and I put, this cost me about $160. I got 4 pieces of 1 inch thick steel, right, that are about 8 by 10, and I put them underneath the round pads because I got cracks in this concrete floor already, and I'm just so worried this 4,000-pound machine is going to crack my concrete. So these pads are only like that, holding this 4,000 machine. So I put big pads underneath to distribute the weight. So that's what I did. So the guy comes to level it, and I had already gotten the coolant. You download this certificate and you sign it. You say, yeah, I bought a Haas or whatever. So this company will give you your first batch of coolant for free. I think it's like a $70 value or something. Maybe 50, I don't know, something like that. So I get 5 gallons of coolant, and I had a bunch of city water. I had about half a city water, and I said to the guy, for some reason, when I watched that New York City, whatever, he was mixing coolant. So I thought this guy was going to mix the coolant for me. So I said, you going to mix the coolant for me? He goes, no. He says, but he's a real nice guy. He says, I will if you want me to. I said, yes, let's mix the coolant. Apparently you put the coolant in the water, not the water in the coolant. It sounded like you're mixing acid, but I said, why is that? He said, well, you know, it's this oily stuff, and I guess, you know, you can get a colloidal imbalance in here where it all clumps together. You want it all uniform and dissolved. So since it's like a colloid, you want it all mixed up, thinned out evenly. Otherwise, it's going to clump together and won't work right. So anyway, it took us about, God, you know, a good 20 minutes or more to mix up all this coolant, five gallons at a time. And then by our estimation, we didn't have enough. I think the machine holds 55 gallons or something, and we only had enough to mix up 50 or something. So there's actually a float and a meter in it. It'll tell you how much coolant. So I looked at it and it said, like, you're 90% full. So he takes out his refractometer or whatever, densitometer, and he measured it. He says, yeah, you're pretty good. So my mixer's right, only the volume's off. So I called up the guy and I said, look, could you send me some more coolant? Because since this first dose is free. He goes, why? I said, well, I've only been able to mix up like 45 gallons or something, and I needed 55. He says, that was enough to mix up 60 gallons. Well, look, you know, the stuff's free. I'm not going to argue with the guy. I just said, well, the guy's, you know, densitometer wasn't showing that it was diluted improperly, and we only cut with this. But okay, fine, you know. I figured, what the heck? I got enough to work with. So we did that. All right. So before I got here, I got a good air compressor, and this works fine. Home Depot supposedly go to 135 psi. No problem with it. I have a 80-gallon sitting out in the garage. I didn't hook it up yet. It's been sitting there for months. I got that from my plasma cutter because it seemed like the plasma cutter was just eating up the air from my little I don't know, 40-gallon compressor or whatever. So I had got that, but I hadn't gotten around to that. But I figured I don't want to put an 80-gallon huge compressor in here, and this I believe is going to do the job. I wish they had another way to change tools and stuff, but it is what it is. But that's the only time you use them, when you're changing tools. And I'll tell you what, the amazing thing is, if this thing puts like 60 pounds into that system, you come back the next day and there's 60 pounds there. It doesn't leak. Really amazing. I've never seen anything like that. So this is not leaking. The machine's not leaking. I was really impressed with that. And it's got some filters and stuff. I got another filter and all that I wanted to hook up, but for right now, I'm just going with this. So I think the next thing I'll talk about is when the technician came by to hook it up. I'll talk about experience. But what I had done in the meantime, I'm learning a little bit. The machine has some requirements, like you don't want to start this thing from dead cold. It has to go through a warm-up phase. And I was learning the code for that. So once the first technician was here, we hooked it up and ready to go. So I'm just playing with it a little bit, tool change and this and that. And I'm not doing much with it. Just maybe a couple minutes a day. Trying to learn all this G-code stuff and all. And I start getting these error messages. Like, you've only got so many days to whatever, you got this, got that. And I'm just like kind of ignoring it. But apparently, when you turn this thing on, it talks to the internet. And it goes to the factory. And the factory has this deal where if they sell you a machine on installments and you don't pay your installment, they disable your machine electronically. It's a nice safety system for them. So this machine said, you've only got, a couple more days, a couple more days. And then it quits working. And it's like, call your service rep or whatever, I get this error message. So anyway, when the guy comes, he says, yeah,